The Omaha Tribe of Nebraska made their way to the state capitol today in hopes of restarting what the tribe calls stalled negotiations.
Tribal officials tell our John Chapman the talks could impact a medical cannabis law that's now on the books.
Omaha natives brought their music, their traditions, and their culture to the state capitol and explained the history of our state.
We are the only federally recognized tribe that shares a boundary with the state of Nebraska and can say without a question that we were here before statehood and that the signing of the 1854 treaty with Washington made Nebraska statehood possible.
Tribal members are here to be heard to encourage lawmakers to pass LB 1037. The bill would establish guardrails in talks with the state over the tobacco tax compact.
The current statute says the governor may enter into negotiations with the various Nebraska tribes. We want to change that into language that states the governor shall enter into good faith negotiations where they cannot use unrelated topics to use unnecessary leverage for those talks.
Members of the Omaha Tribe believe one of those unrelated topics is medical cannabis. Unlike Nebraska's Medical Cannabis Committee, the Omaha Tribe's Cannabis Commission is fast-tracking its plan to fully own all operations for medical cannabis and hope to offer the medicine to those in need by the end of the year. Some believe the state is leveraging the tobacco tax compact funds to prevent the tribe from getting into the medical cannabis business.
Yes, cannabis is certainly something that's been told to us has impacted those negotiations.
Nebraska State Senator Jane Raybould is chairperson of the Tribal Relations Committee. She sponsors LB 1037. She's hoping the bill will pass and the Omaha Tribe will be heard and both governments will work together.
The most important thing is how we can continue to work cooperatively and collaboratively together. And together, we can continue to make a difference to our fellow Nebraskans.
In Lincoln, I'm John Chapman, First Alert 6.
Senator Raybould also introduced LB 1016. The bill would allow Nebraska natives to use traditional healing services and provide reimbursement through Medicaid.
Well, be sure to